This week on the show, we have MidnightBSD 1.0 being released. We have a MeetBSD review as well as EuroBSDcon trip reports for you. We have an article about DNS over TLS in FreeBSD 12, upgrading OpenBSD with Ansible, and how to use SmartD to run tests on your drives automatically, and more in this week's episode of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 271, Automatic Drive Tests, recorded on the 7th of November 2018. Hello, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we have a great show prepared for you this week, starting off with new BSD releases. This time it's MidnightBSD 1.0. The cat is in the moon.
Of course, that's what they're going to get.
In the half moon.
So everybody's favorite BSD distro named after somebody's cat. They're happy to announce the availability of MidnightBSD 1.0 for AMD 64 and i386. Over the years, many ambitious goals were set for a 1.0 release. As the time approached, it became clear it wouldn't be able to accomplish all of those. This release is more of a natural progression than a groundbreaking event. It includes many updates to the base system, improvements to the package manager, updated compiler, and tools. Of particular note, you can now boot off ZFS and use NVMe SSDs, and some AMD Radeon graphics cards now support acceleration. AMD Ryzen support is also greatly improved, and they've added Beehive from FreeBSD to the release. The 1.0 release is finally available, although packages are still building as of the 14th of October, so they're probably done by now. Packages take a while, but they don't really take that long. The single largest issue with the release has been the web server performance. The CPU is overloaded and has been at 100% solid for days, I'm guessing, building those packages, which is i7 770 or 7700. I'm trying to figure out what you do to buy an upgrade. It's actually blocking multiple processes. A 6 or 8 core chip might be an improvement for the workload. I know the official FreeBSD package builders usually have 32 or 48 threads to do the package building.
They need those.
Then it still takes about a day each for each version for each architecture. Hence why there are like a dozen or more of those machines. Anyway, in the show notes, there's links to download the latest version of MidnightBSD and also a YouTube video giving you a little walkthrough.
Oh yeah, excellent. So that people get an idea of what it can do and what it contains. So that's MidnightBSD. Next up, we have a MeetBSD review. Remember our review that we did a couple of shows ago? But this one is from Linux Unplugged. And, of course, Chris Goes to MeetBSD is the title, with Chris being Chris Fisher, of course. Mm-hmm. And he has a very nice and detailed write-up of his experiences, and it goes like this. MeetBSD 2018 took place at the sprawling Intel Santa Clara campus. The venue itself got more like an olive branch than a simple friendly gesture by Intel. In truth, it felt like a bit of an apology. You get a subtle sense they feel bad about how the BSDs were treated with the Meltdown and Spectre flaws. In fact, you may be right to think they felt a bit sorry towards the entire open source community. So MeetBSD 2018, at most massive venues, the parking is the first concern. Not so here. In fact, that was a rather straightforward thing. No, the real challenge is navigating the buildings. Yeah, because Intel is not just a single building, but
is large, and you have to find the right building.
So luckily, he had help from a navigator extraordinaire, Hadea, who located the correct building, SC12, quickly. Finding the entrance took a moment or two, though. The lobby itself was converted by AX Systems efficiently into the MeetBSD Expo Hall. Clean, efficient, and roomy with registration. Some seating and an extra conference room for one-on-one sessions. On day 2, sponsor booths were also set up. and all who showed up on day one were warmly greeted with badges, lanyards, and goodies by Denise and her friendly team. Yeah, that was a good arrival. You get
I was
your
helping
lanyards
early, but if you arrive late like Chris did, then
everything is already in the state where it should be. Okay, then like every great BSD event, plenty of food was made available. And as always, they make it look effortless. Oh yes, that's true. These events showcase IX Systems' inherent generosity towards its community, with breakfast items in the back of the main auditorium room in the morning, boxed lunches, fruit and cookies at lunchtime, and snacks for the rest of the day. Yes, the food was excellent. I also had a very good food memory. And I tried to get everything, a little bit of everything, but it's difficult.
I think I tried 3 of the 4 different kinds of boxed lunch between the 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But just in case you're still there's a pizza meetup in another Intel room after day 1 and 2. So MeetBSD leverages its realistically small crowds of size on day 1. The morning starts off with introductions of the entire group. The mic is passed around the room. The group is a good mix of pros in the industry, such as Juniper, Intel, eBay, Groupon, Cisco, etc., IX staff, and a few enthusiasts. I don't know where we fit in there, but yeah, somehow in between.
But one of the advantages to keeping MeetBSD under 300 people is that first thing in the first morning, you can actually have every person say their name and a little bit about what they do with BSD, and it helps everybody feel more like part of the conference. And it's part of the unconference style of MeetBSD. Isn't just you're here to listen to the people on the speaker list. It's we're all here to talk to everybody.
So that no one is feeling left out or is just passively listening.
Well, it's just, more so that, I get more out of the conference by going because I get to talk to 100 people instead of, listen to 10.
Okay, on it goes. Lots of people with a focus on or passion for networking. And of course, some friendly Linux bashing went down for good measure, always followed by a good-natured chuckle. So, the kickoff. There's a picture of Alan here in front of the MeetBSD
the back of my head, anyway.
Yeah, but it's you. Yeah. Okay. At 10 a.m., Chris Moore takes the stage to lay out how TrueOS can be used to bootstrap a FreeBSD-based distribution. And there was some encouragement from Chris to his fellow developers to modernize some of their workflow. And underneath it all, there is currently a debate underway about switching FreeBSD development to Git. Modernizing the tools and process that various members of the BSD community use feels like a growing area of focus. The second talk of the day was Intel and FreeBSD, Better Together by Ben Wiedoski from Intel's open source area. And he has a long history of development in the multimedia area, including extensive driver work on Linux. He's now focusing on technology enabling for FreeBSD, and this being the second talk of the event seemed purposeful. Ben had something he wanted to get across. Oh yeah, he did. He put a lot of effort into his presentation. He wanted to clearly communicate that Intel is a contributor to open source and intends to do better. He also went out of his way to cover his area of expertise, actively soliciting input and help from the audience at hand. There was a lot of top-level attention on this event from Intel. The longish negotiation process the organizers went through to get Intel to ratchet down security is a bit of a context for this talk too. But also noteworthy that Wiedoski's talk was closely scrutinized by Intel Legal, with what seems to be special emphasis taken on their statement on their security first pledge. And here's a picture of me. Yes, I was at the conference, so that's the proof. Excellent.
Yeah, there were also talks by Andrew Fengler about monitoring and what not monitor. Breakout groups where we talked about a bunch of things, including 100 gigabit plus networking, the Bloomberg story about motherboards, which we've still not seen one of these motherboards for real yet, and how that worked out. There was the ZFS expert panel. So got...
See that? Yep.
Michael Lucas, myself, Alexander Moten, Pavel Doedek, and Dan Langil up on stage and just took questions from the audience and kind of talked a bit about what's coming up in ZFS next. And then, as we said, we had the pizza and stuff for dinner. On the second day, started off with Michael Lucas's why he chooses to use BSD as an opening keynote, bunch of other talks. But the real important one was near the end here. We said, before the special guests can take the stage, the IX Systems staff planned a surprise thank you for Denise Irby, the planner of this event and so many others. And, the person who made sure we all had that excellent food for lunch every day and so on. She worked hard to secure everything from each individual speaker to each and every bite of food provided, and made sure that the room was full, and all this, and you could feel the appreciation from the whole audience to Denise for all that work. It was really a genuinely sweet moment, and the group's tightness was palpable. I can easily say I've never been tempted to tear up at an event like this before, but this one got to me. There was a true affection in history that many of the attendees have with each other, and the recognition of hard work well done has resonated. This alone made the second day special for me, but I think the day's special guest was also the highlight, and that was Kirk McCusick. And he did his Choose Your Own Adventure talk, and the vote came up that we would hear the story of how TCP/IP came to BSD.
Oh yeah, that was good.
And then we had the bunch of other talks, including Devin Teskey's talk about using dtrace in production, how to wrangle virtual machines, and another one on choosing the right language for your different projects. And then there's the group photo here.
Oh yeah.
See,
I'm somewhere in the back.
Yeah, we all just kind of piled in there together.
Yeah.
So his closing thoughts are, MeetBSD gives me the feels. I find that I'm subtly unnerved at this venue, and at lunch I saw it clearly. I have always had a strong geek radar, allowing me to navigate a new area like Berkeley for MeetBSD or even Scale in Pasadena. And at a glance, I can see who is from the conference and who isn't. This means it's easy, nearly effortless, to know who to greet with a smile and wave, and who's just a random person. These are my people. But here at the Intel campus, though, it's different. The drive in alone reveals the behemoth complexes of all the well-known tech names on display in Silicon Valley, and all of these are my people. So much for knowing who's from the conference. Thank goodness for those infamous BSD horns, because then you know who's with the conference. Nonetheless, I'm struck by how massive these tech giants are, and Intel is one of the largest of those. And to see the physical reminders of this fact brought home the significance that they had opened their doors, Wi-Fi, and even their bathrooms to the BSD community.
Yeah, it's bathrooms become important once the conference has been running for a couple of hours.
When he originally posted this, I had asked him, which one is more intimate, sharing your Wi-Fi or your bathroom?
Ooh.
I think I'm more likely to let a stranger on my Wi-Fi than use my bathroom.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, great experience report from that conference. And that was the first time actually when I had a chance to actually meet Chris in person and talk to him. And that was nice. Oh yeah, I feel that's a good outside view still from the, he's been to a couple of BSD events.
Been to, mostly Linux conferences, has done MeetBSD 2 years ago. But yes, very much the perspective of somebody who's not really that into BSD, uses FreeNAS and is aware of what BSD is and has heard me talk about it in his ear repeatedly for years, but isn't that into it himself, but still got value out of that conference, which really goes to show how useful it is.
Yeah, that's the important stuff. You don't have to be an enthusiast or just interested enough to, to learn something. And that's certainly happening at the BSD conferences. All right. Next up, we have remember EuroBSDcon 2018 in Bulgaria? Yes, we have some trip reports now coming up as part of the travel grants the FreeBSD Foundation gives out. We have 3 of them on their blog. The first one is from Joseph Mingron. That's long. Oh, wow.
There's a reason why we picked Joseph to be the FreeBSD core team secretary.
Thoroughness in write-ups, which is good. I mean,
yeah, he starts up talking when he arrived for the Dev Summit on Thursday. It had a bit of an unconference feel because we didn't have a set schedule. After introductions and greetings, we got down to brass tacks and did some hacking in small groups, and also came up with a list of things that we wanted to accomplish for FreeBSD 13, which we actually have later in the show notes. And he also got the opportunity to work in person with Dave Cuddlehuber on a review, catch up on some core email, and update a few of his ports. Eventually, Sean Chittenden stepped up and led a room-wide discussion as part of the Dev Summit, including talking about expectations from the 10th core team, workflow and version control stuff, and our goals for FreeBSD 13. But there's lots of detail about what happened at the Dev Summit. If you're interested, you can check that out. There's also, he broke down a couple of things of what we want that he found most interesting, including better support for automation tools like using libucl, better user experience, putting fewer things in base, having structured log files, and so on. Then Dave Cuddlehuber also gave a talk about bringing back something like red ports, basically a CI system so that when you make a port for FreeBSD, you can send it away to get tested, because compiling some of the bigger ports on every supported version of FreeBSD can end up taking quite a while. And having that done in the background and you just getting the results might be easier than depending on you running it on your laptop or something. Then the conference proper started, and he has lots of notes from that, and it's worth checking out. He even put links to the slides for some of the talks that he highlighted.
Oh yeah, excellent. And I remember he had some kind of some cold or something, but he still managed to get enough from the conference to have it valuable.
And like he says in the closing thoughts here, indeed, the talks in the Developer Summit were interesting, but a meaningful aspect of the conference like this for him was stepping away from the comfort of IRC and mail clients and engaging in face-to-face discussions with other people. We spend significant amounts of time working on a common goal, and it's especially rewarding for me to make a connection with other members of the team. So thanks to the FreeBSD Foundation for supporting my trip to EuroBSDcon 2018.
Yeah, thanks.
I remember when I first met Joseph quite a few years ago at BSDCon. I think it might have been 2015.
Could be, yeah.
And he was staying quite a ways away from the university. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning because we'd been in the hacker lounge all night. And I was like, my business partner doesn't arrive until like 2 days from now, but I have the double room at the residence. So I'm like, here, have the second room in my thing and stay here instead of, the buses aren't running anymore. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to be able to get to your other hotel.
Yeah.
You can crash here. You can just leave the key card on the table in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, that was great to see him at EuroBSDcon, and hopefully that's not the last conference he's going to. Mm-hmm. And next one is the trip report from Vinicius Savam. That's properly pronounced. So he talks about how his company, Cleverbridge, and the local staff who organized and prepared everything, how he found that interesting, and thanks to the people who did all the organizing. That was a great experience for him. So this is the third BSD-focused conference event that he's attending, and it was amazing. The first one was the one that he organized himself in Fortaleza, Brazil, back in 2015, which was 12 years after the very first BSDCon there. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so he, during his stay at Bucharest, he attended the dev summits and tutorials.
You skipped over the important part.
Oh, sorry. Here,
If you're asking, if you're asking yourself about the conference he organized, you could take a look at the interview he did on BSD Now. Spoiler, it was recorded in Canada at BSDCon.
Yes, I remember. Okay, in 2016. Wow, or at least it was the year when it was aired, that show. Okay, so during his stay, so he's now living in Germany, and it didn't take him 20 hours of travel this time, like the year he went to Ottawa for BSDCon. He met a couple of people there and had a great time talking to them. And during the conference, so he went to my tutorial actually about Ansible, then to Niklas Seising's tutorial about ports and Poudriere. I also went to that. And then Peter Hessler's talk about BGP, I think, BGPD. And also he had used all of the things that he has used all the tools that were presented on. And yeah, that was a nice thing that Peter Hessler did. And he liked that way of presenting and doing the tutorial this way. So he talked to a lot of people he usually only talks to on IRC. So it was great for him to see and meet Marcelo, Beat, René Ladan, Baptiste and Rodrigo Osorio, as well as Madi Mokhtari, Maxim Sobolev, and a bunch of other people. Too many to name. But this is the reason why you should go to conferences. Meet the people in person. And yeah, then he pretty much, he liked also the social events. He liked them very much, not only the food and drinks, but also everyone interacting with each other and enjoying the evening together with lots of fun and good mood. And he didn't hear any complaints about anything about the conference during or after. So that was cool. And he also talked to me and Sato-san. I tried to bring all the doc people together because he was involved in translating restarting the translation efforts for the documentation project for Brazil, or the Brazilian documentation project. So they managed to, in a short amount of time, translate more than 25 articles and 4 books in just 1 month. And we talked a little bit about the tools they were using and how to use that in a project scale, not just for a single translation project. Mm-hmm. So yeah, great. And he's thankful that he could make it to the foundation as well. And yeah, great. Look forward to seeing him again.
Yeah, and he says on the closing night, he managed to stop by the Speaker Hotel for some last beers and say goodbye to people including Kirk McCusick, Henning Brouwer, Peter Hessler, and Olivier Robert.
Yeah, it's nice too. I mean, sometimes you always wanted to say goodbye to a certain person, then you don't see them again until the next day, or everyone goes in a different direction, or they depart earlier. But yeah, use the time that you have with the people. You never know when you bump into them again.
And then finally, we have a trip report from Emmanuel Vadot, who said, I'd like to start by thanking the FreeBSD Foundation for sponsoring my trip to EuroBSDcon in Romania. I arrived the day before the FreeBSD Dev Summit in Vicinius. The trip report we just finished.
The one we had earlier. Yeah.
Who is also sponsored by the foundation. I was waiting for him at the airport. We arrived at the Airbnb that we had booked together, and then slowly walked over to meet Marcelo Arujo and Mihai Textu for the first unofficial dinner of the conference. And he walks through what he got out of the Dev Summit, including working on his own or in a small group and hacking on his Pinebook, which I was showing off in the pre-show. He's got most of the Pinebook, the $99 ARM-based laptop. So far, everything I've tried on it works except for the trackpad. That was still a work in progress. But I can boot FreeBSD on it and run X and do things. So that's a lot of progress.
Yeah, based on his progress and his work. Great, yeah.
Yeah, so focusing on that, and the Dev Summit didn't really end just because we left the venue. It continued on through the dinner and so on. During the Dev Summit, he also spoke with Tom Jones and Jules about the Pinebook support In particular, TJ had been offered one during the Dev Summit, and since he had another one soon, he gave it to Jules to help test and develop drivers for. So more people working on the Pine 64 and Pine books, which is good.
Yeah, the more the better.
Then the conference started, and he said he personally liked the Using Boot Environments at Scale by Alan Jude. Oh, okay.
Dude.
I guess
you should have known
it makes
that
sense
title.
because it's building on the Prudere image tool, which Emmanuel had helped with and used a lot at his previous job. And he also liked the End of DNS as We Know It by Karsten Stroman on the first day, and the second keynote, Some Computing and Networking Historical Perspective by Ron Broersma. I really liked that one. That was very cool. It's too bad that wasn't recorded because that was excellent. And so we learned a lot about the history of the internet from that, and he had some cool relics with him as well and stuff. It was very nice. Then the social event took place that night, and it was located at the Speaker Hotel, which is not far from the conference venue. We all had a really great time, and the food was excellent. The first talk I went to on the last day of the conference was taking NetBSD kernel bug roasting to the next level with the kernel sanitizer by Siddharth Maruli and Kamil Rytarowski. Sorry. There have been a lot of talk recently about adding kernel sanitizers to FreeBSD. I think I actually landed yesterday, or at least Andrew Turner was working on porting that from NetBSD to FreeBSD yesterday, and helped us visualize what that end goal might look like and to see what NetBSD has already accomplished, including some of the advantages of the addition of those kernel sanitizers. The second talk, live patching the FreeBSD kernel. This one was also very interesting, and I hope that we'll soon have those patches. So do I. I need to actually follow up with that guy because I think he needs some encouragement to keep working on it. During the afternoon, I mostly attended the hallway track, talking to others, developers, mainly about ARM support and so on, because that's what he's most into. And he says, as always, the trip was wonderful, and thanks again to the FreeBSD Foundation for helping make it possible.
Thanks for applying for the grant. We always appreciate people sending in those and try to bring as much people as possible to these events.
Yep. And remember, it doesn't have to be a BSD event. If you want to go talk about BSD at a non-BSD event, they'll be even happier to send you.
Yeah, throughout the year, whether it's...
Spread the word.
Yeah. Wherever it's the better the spread we have, even if it's just a small talk about
but
how I like
if
BSD.
We can parachute a little BSD into every Linux conference, we will slowly take over the world.
Oh. So, time for the news roundup this week, and the first one may contain traces of bolts. Because things. This is over at Doug Erling's blog here, and he has an article here about DNS over TLS in FreeBSD 12.
Yeah. So with the arrival of OpenSSL 1.1.1, an upgraded version of Unbound and some changes to the setup and init scripts have arrived in FreeBSD 12.0, which is currently in beta, and now supports the DNS over TLS out of the box. So DNS over TLS is what it sounds like, doing DNS over TCP, but wrapped in a TLS session so that your DNS query is encrypted. It encrypts your requests and the server's replies, and option allows you to verify the identity of the server you're talking to make sure that you're not getting, spoofed DNS replies and so on. The advantages are protection against eavesdropping and protection against manipulation of your DNS traffic. The drawbacks are a slight performance degradation and potential firewall traversal issues as it runs over a non-standard port, 853 instead of 53, which may be blocked on some networks. But let's see how it works. It covers the basic setup, basically setting local unbound TLS to yes in your rc.conf, and configuring which forwarders you want to use. In his examples, they're the Cloudflare ones. He says, note that this is not a configuration you want to run in production, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But then he shows the difference in performance as we do lookups with TLS and without. And you see that a cached response takes about the same amount of time, 0.005 seconds, but doing a regular DNS lookup takes, in this example, about 230 milliseconds, and it took almost double that with TLS.
Okay.
Anyway, it talks through the rest of the setup and how to actually set it up for production. And,
it's
matching it all up.
That's quite a long article and straightforward.
It's got all the details you need, but says in particular, in conclusion, we've seen how to set up Unbound, specifically the local Unbound service that's built into FreeBSD's base system, to use DNS over TLS instead of plain UDP or TCP, and using Cloudflare's public DNS service as an example. We've looked at the performance impact and how to ensure and verify that Unbound validates the server certificate to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks and otherwise getting bad DNS results. The question that remains is whether it's all worth it. There is undeniably a performance hit, though that may improve with future versions of TLS. More important, there are currently very few DNS over TLS providers. Currently only one, because the Quad 9 group filters their responses, and you have to weigh the advantage of encrypting your DNS traffic against the disadvantage of sending it all to a single organization who maybe is now eavesdropping on it, which is the thing you might have been trying to prevent in the first place.
Yeah.
But Erlang can't answer that question for you. That's one of personal choice. But I can tell you that with the parameters are evolving quickly, and if your answer is negative today, it may not remain so for long as more providers come up and you can, distribute your traffic around such that no one company can eavesdrop on it. Within a year or two, running DNS over TLS may very well be the rule rather than the experimental exception.
Yeah, and that's good for everyone because we live a little bit more secure. All right, great article here. Next up, we have upgrading OpenBSD with Ansible over at changeown.me, the cute pieces of OpenBSD evangelism blog. It starts with, a few months ago, I needed software that had just hit the ports tree. I didn't want to wait for the next release, so I upgraded my router to use current. Since then, I've continued running current, which means upgrading to a newer snapshot every so often. Running current is great, but the process of updating to a newer snapshot was cumbersome. Initially, I had to plug in a serial cable and then reboot into bsd.rd, hit enter 10 times, then reboot, run sysmerge, and update packages. Really, just 10 times. I eventually switched to OpenBSD to be able to upgrade without... Oh, no, UPO-BSD? Is that a typo? Wait. No, it's UPO-BSD. Yeah, there's a link here to Bitbucket.
It seems to be a tool for updating. OpenBSD.
Updating OpenBSD. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. So he switched to UPO-BSD to be able to upgrade without the need for a serial connection. The process was better, but still tiresome. Usually I would prepare the special version of bsd.rd, boot on bsd.rd, and do something like wash the dishes in the meantime. After about 10 minutes, I would dry my hands and then go back to my workstation to see whether the bsd.rd part had finished so I could run sysmerge and package add, and then return to the dishes while it upgraded packages. The dry your hands part in between is important. Yeah. Okay, so out of laziness, I thought I should automate this, and that's typically, where it all starts. But what happens instead is that I simply didn't upgrade that machine very often. Yes, laziness. With my router out of commission, life is very dull because it is my gateway to the internet. Even services hosted at my place, like my Mastodon instance, are not reachable when the router is down because I use multiple VLANs, so I need the router to jump across VLANs. There goes the Ansible reboot module. I recently got a new job, and one of my first tasks was auditing the Ansible roles written by my predecessors. In one role, the machine rebooted and they used the wait_for_connection module to wait for it to come back up. Yeah, that pretty much waits with the execution in the playbook until a connection is again available or a port, and then it continues. So that sounded quite hackish to me, so out of curiosity, I tried to determine whether there was a better way. I also thought I might be able to use something similar to further automate my OpenBSD upgrades and wanted to assess the cleanliness of this method. I learned that with the then upcoming 2.7 Ansible release, a proper reboot module would be included. I went to the docs, which stated that for a certain parameter, you can find the details in the show notes here. On Linux and macOS, this is converted to minutes and rounded down. If less than 60, it will be set to 0. And on Solaris and FreeBSD, this will be seconds. Okay. I took this to mean that there was no support for OpenBSD. I looked at the code, and indeed, there was not. However, I believed that it wouldn't be too hard to add it. I added the missing pieces for OpenBSD, tested it on my poor Pine 64, and then submitted it upstream. After a quick back and forth, the module's author merged it into devel. Having a friend working at Red Hat helped them process. Mercy, Cyril. A couple days later, the release engineer merged it into stable 2.7. I proceeded to actually write the playbook, and then I hit a bug. The parameter reboot_timeout was not recognized by Ansible. This feature would definitely be useful on a slow machine, such as the Pine 64 and its dying SD card. Again, my fix was merged into master by the module's author and then merged into stable 2.7. Yeah, and then 2.7.1 will be the first release to feature these fixes, but if you use OpenBSD current, you already have access to them. I backported the patches when I updated Ansible. Fun fact about Ansible and reboots, the win_reboot module was included with Ansible 2.1, while for Unix systems, it wasn't added until 2.7. For more details, you can read the module's author blog article.
Well, I don't normally reboot my Unix machines.
Exactly, yeah. You just restart services, but not the whole machine typically, unless there's something really wrong here. So the explanations here, Ansible runs my script on the remote host to fetch the sets. It creates an answer file from the template and then gives it to UPOBSD, or UPOBSD. Once UPOBSD has created the kernel, Ansible copies it in place of /BSD on the host, and the router reboots and boots on /BSD, which is UPOBSD's BSD.rd. The installer runs into auto_update mode, and once it's back for BSD.rd land, it archives the kernel and finishes it by upgrading all the packages. It also supports upgrading without fetching the sets ahead of time. For instance, I upgrade this way on my Pine 64 because if I cared about speed, I wouldn't use this weak computer with its dying SD card. For this case, I just comment out the path_sets variable in Ansible, and Ansible instead creates an answer file that will instruct the installer to fetch the sets from the designated mirror. I've been archiving my kernels for a few years. It's a nice way to fill up /keep history of my upgrades. If I spot a regression, I can try a previous kernel, which may not work with the then desynchronized userland, but that's another story. Sysmerge already runs with rc.sysmerge in batch mode and sends the result by email. I don't think there's a merit to running it again in the playbook. The only perk would be discovering in the terminal whether any files needed to be manually merged, rather than reading exactly the same output in the email. Initially, I used the OpenBSD package module, but it doesn't work on current just because, just before a release, because package add automatically looks for pub/OpenBSD, then the release, and then /packages for the architecture, which is empty. I wrote and tested this playbook while 6.4 was around the corner, so I switched to command mode to be able to pass the dsnap parameter. And the result is, I'm very happy with the playbook. It performs the upgrade with a little intervention as possible and minimal downtime. And you can see the full playbook in the blog post, of course. Yeah, not too bad. Excellent.
And then one last story.
Oh, yes. So this story has a little bit of history. So this is over at Dan Dangel's blog, the other blog. So Dan always documents stuff that he's doing and stuff that he's learning so other people can make use of that. And this time, it's using SmartD to automatically run tests on your drives. I think, Alan, you
Yes,
were involved in that. Well,
not really.
a little bit.
But I think part of the reason Dan writes down everything is so that I find it very helpful because when he comes and asks for help, he's got the command output from before and after and every step that he's taken, which makes it much easier to figure out where he started, where he got to, and where he wants to get to. But also, 2 years from now, when he needs to know how to do something that has already been explained to him, he can go back and figure out what it was. So yes, I encourage more people to keep notes like this. You don't have to publish it, but you might as well. It's going to be helpful to somebody. So thank you very much, Dan, for doing this. But he goes on saying, SmartD and SmartCTL are two utility programs that are part of the SmartMon Tools package on FreeBSD. It's under the sysutils category in ports. These programs can control and monitor storage systems using the self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology system called SMART, built into most modern ATA and SAS drives, and even NVMe drives, although it's not really smart for NVMe, but it's basically the same thing. In many cases, these utilities will provide advanced warning of disk degradation and failure. And you can see their website for more stuff. But it says, note, due to OS-specific issues and also dependencies on the different state of SmartMon tools development on that platform, device support is not the same on all OS platforms. But it's quite good on FreeBSD.
Oh, yeah.
So Dan says, I first started using SmartD back in March of 2010, according to the blog post I wrote about that. But then, and until recently, all it did was start SmartD. As far as I can tell, all it did was send daily status messages to via FreeBSD periodic tools. I would set my drive devices via the daily status smart devices variable in periodic.conf, and the daily status report would include the drive health information. So you would see, as the example output he has here, it just says, ADA0 is good, and DA0 is good, and DA7 is good, etc. But he says, looking at it more closely, you can see there's a bunch of flags. If you set the daily status smartctl flags, you see this defaults to -H, which is a basic health check. Perhaps this could be used to invoke the the long or short drive tests. But I don't think that would be the best way to achieve the goal. So there are two types of tests. The short test, which takes a few minutes, and the long test, which can take many hours. You can see some of the output. He has a post from back in 2016 where he's played with that before. When I got a new drive, I run both the short and long test on them. While far from an exhaustive test, it's a basic smoke test to make sure the drive is good before you start using it. Now I see how I can easily configure these tests to run on a regular basis and get emailed about any issues. So originally he had his first attempt to do this, which started with a tweet. I have a strong urge to write a script to run monthly SmartCTL long tests on my drives. I would stagger them out throughout the month, like starting one drive each day or something, because he has 20 some odd drives. So he wrote a small script to enumerate the drives and test one drive per day and was getting ready to do some more work when Bryce Chidester saved him from all of that and pointed out that SmartD already has scheduling built into it. So that saved him a bunch of effort. So how do you prove that it works? When I started using a new feature, I like to know that it works. Given this is going to be a running test on a regular basis, I wanted to see what it does and what it says. So let's look at this Dell R710, which is his database server and runs a daily Poudriere build, which has a smartd.conf that lists all of his devices and says to do a short test and a long test on a schedule.
Yeah, you need to know understand the syntax a little bit, but Dan goes into it.
Yep.
In a little while.
And then when you run smartctl scan and give it all of that information, you can see it doing the work. And it explains what the different parameters are. And so the S is the self-test and
the slow
this regular expression.
The short test and
the
long
either
test
short
is
test
after
or a
that.
long test, and how often you should check it, and so on.
Yeah, and then he
So
looks at the test results.
Yeah, he's running a short test every day on the 15th hour, and the long test on a certain day of the month, a different hour.
Yeah, and you can see that in the log. You can see the lifetime hours, and that's each time when the test runs. So you can see that there's a new test run added to that log.
Yep.
Every 24 hours in this case.
Every 24 hours in this case, you can see a short test being done. And then the periodic long test.
So I have the same at the university because after I read that blog post on the next day, I pretty much implemented the same for the disk that I have in the big data cluster. I just use a different time because some students are night owls. Who would have thought? And so my short tests are run at 4 a.m. in the morning because we had some students that are still active at 3 a.m. but not at 4 a.m. So I think that's a good time. And I don't run any long tests because I think that's taking too much time. And
it degrades the performance of the drive the whole time it's running. Now, the drive does try to only run the long test in the background and keep it from interfering, but you're making the drive do more work. So once a month, and typically, maybe more often than you want. It's hard to say.
Yeah, and typically the short tests tell you enough that whether the drive is dying or just updates the stats internally.
So importantly, Dan actually had a drive that was failing and was able to test the results. So he set it up, and you can see when you look at the output here, he's got extended offline test that completed but had a read failure. And so he should get an email about that.
Yeah, and you can see how the message looks like.
Yeah, you can see he got the warning that there was a failure on one of his Toshiba drives, and it gives him the serial number and all the details. And it also adds it to syslog, letting you know that the error count increased from 0 to 1.
Mm-hmm. And you should monitor that and prepare for that. Because, as Alan always says, your disks are plotting against you.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. You just add that line. Remember not to put in the device scan line in your smartd.conf because that will invalidate everything else that comes afterwards. So comment outload that line, and then you can add your own smartctl scans for each individual disk that you have or drive, and then define when those tests should run and what the email address should be that it should be sent to. So all in all, great article. Well worth sharing.
Yeah, and he covers setting up on a couple of different machines that have different configurations. So it's interesting to be able to do to see that way and see how it works with different machines that have different configurations, whether that's having some SSDs and some hard drives, or having hard drives that are on different types of controllers and so on.
Yep. So people should set that up sooner rather than later. So, time for Beastie Bits this week, starting with decent picks of RelayD and HTTPD mastery signatures. So remember, Michael W. Lucas did an auction during MeetBSD, so this is already over by the time you're watching this. And people could sign from either the OpenBSD camp or the FreeBSD camp those individual books, and this one is the decoration for RelayD and HTTPD mastery. He took a picture of that, and Ayaka did that. So the blog post is short. There's 3 OpenBSD devs at MeetBSD, or were actually. The auction for this first ever hardcover signed by these folks is or was up to $250, and that went
ended up selling for $1,000.
That went to the OpenBSD Foundation, and among others, you'll get an original Ayaka Koshiba illustration. You can see that
here,
which
is like 2 capybaras or something. I'm not entirely sure. The picture's small. I'm not. The art is good. It's just the picture is a bit small.
You would have to, be in the auction to get that and see it in full size. Yeah.
And there's a link to some ugly pictures of some of the other ones that you see people adding their own footnotes. Or actually, I think this one here is Kirk's wiener dog thing. I don't know if
it could be. Yeah. I see that often when he signs books. It's his signature icon or picture. But yeah, definitely a great idea by Michael Lucas to have that kind of auction during the conference. And thanks to all the people who auctioned or participated in the auction because it went to a good cause, either the EuroBSD, sorry, the FreeBSD Foundation or the OpenBSD Foundation, respectively. Okay, next item is that we have a Unix shell poster from 1983. I was a small kid by then, but look at that shell here.
Well, I wasn't born until the year after.
So here you can see from the very inner circle going outside and getting bigger and bigger.
I think it was mostly that they wanted to write all the shell commands in the shape of a seashell.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And they all fit in there. So way back when, they still had that amount of commands available. And yeah, as you can already see which popular commands were still around or already around during that time.
Well, what's really interesting is that killing a process in the background was del for delete. And then, like removing a background process like the BG and FG commands was with kill. And then to kill the current process was the delete key.
Oh, yes. There's no less command still. There's just more. Unless I don't see it here. But yeah, I see more on the left, but no less. Yes. Okay. Well, some of these commands are still to be developed. So definitely, maybe they still have those in print somewhere. So for the nostalgics around us, they could probably get one of those posters. I'm not sure. But yeah, good to have.
Well, the type of people who might have that would be the Cambridge Unix Historians Meetup Group.
Ah, yes, which brings us to our next item.
Yes, so this is a meetup group in Cambridge in the UK, organized by Demetrius. Is that the professor that did the talk that I'm thinking of or not? I don't know. Anyway.
Could be.
I say we'll be getting together to discuss Unix, operating systems, compilers, networkings, etc. Don't forget to bring your copy of the Lions book, referring to the source code of Unix annotated books that used to have to be photocopied because they got shut down by AT&T.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I remember those. Okay, more current plans into modern days. The goals for FreeBSD 13 are listed here that we did.
Yeah,
so we did
our notes from the EuroBSDcon FreeBSD Dev Summit.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, not from the MeetBSD session where we had the have need want, but the goals actually from.
This is
Dev
just
Summit.
Broader goals of what we hope to accomplish in FreeBSD 13.
And if you find something interesting you always wanted to work on, then by all means, get involved.
Yeah. There's an entire page titled Documentation Sweep that could use help.
Oh, yeah. It's in need of much help. Yeah, but that's a good inspiration to see where things could head. Other things in our Beastie Bits are the September/October issue of the FreeBSD Journal, which is now available or has been available for some time now. We just covered the headlines or some of the articles in there. So this issue has, basically the overall topic.
TCP stack virtualization, TCP stack validation at Netflix. A tour of using software-defined networking with Mininet from Ayaka, I think, actually. FreeBSD and processor trends. A letter from the FreeBSD Foundation. A new Faces of FreeBSD article. Letters from readers. SVN update, a conference update, and a conference calendar. And lots of other goodies in there.
And we are still looking, or always looking, for people to write articles for the journal or review books for the journal. That can be arranged. If you're interested, then get involved or send me an email to bcr@freebsd.org, and I'll make the connections to the FreeBSD journal folks.
Yeah. They have good copy editors and so on, so they'll make your writing sound better.
Oh yeah, no, that's no problem. I mean,
yeah. So
my writing is not the best, but they turn.
Your English grammar is a lot better than mine.
Yeah, well, okay, I have to thank my English teacher, I guess. But generally, they can proofread. They create these. I mean, I give them basically text, and they turn it into these nicely designed articles, and it's just amazing what they come up with each time. And yeah, this is a nice way of spicing up your text. Okay, next up, using ACME or acme.sh, which is your Let's Encrypt shell for Let's Encrypt certificates on packagesource.org servers. This is over at the NetBSD blog.
Yeah, so this is a post by SP Zeidler talking about how they actually use Peter Wem's write-up on how they use acme.sh on freebsd.org and making it work for the packagesource.org servers.
Excellent. So,
and in particular, they're using NSUpdate to create the dynamic records they need to verify DNS.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, that's good to have.
It's slightly simplified, and just having a second one to look at. The FreeBSD one is extra complicated because of the amount of moving parts involved. So seeing a slightly simplified version like this, but still fully automated, is very nice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, certainly. Okay, what's next?
Next, there's an article on deploying Anycast DNS using OpenBSD and BGP. They talk about John Williams says, my home network is connected to the NYC Mesh, a community-owned open network. Recently, the failure of an SD card in my Raspberry Pi, the failure of an SD card in a Raspberry Pi at an adjacent large hub left my area of the network without a caching recursive DNS resolver. So I stood up my own instance at the 10.10.10.10 Anycast address that they use in their internal network. And he talks a bit about how he did it using OpenBSD, VMD, Unbound, NSD, RelayD, and OpenBGPD. So if you want to know how to create a DNS server and hook it up with Anycast, it's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the last item that we have is how to check your data integrity over at the dataswamp.org website. And they talk about, data degradation, bit rot, and damaged files, or whatever you want to call it, simply by, the use of the data and storing it on media that is less reliable over time, and errors that could creep in.
There's no media that's completely reliable, so
unfortunately, yeah.
But yes, he's saying basically if the checksum of the data has changed, but the modification time of that data has not changed, then it's bit rot. When updating a file, it could be mistaken for bit rot. So if the checksum changed and the modification time changed, then that was an update instead. So how do you ensure that the change you saw was actually bit rot? And it covers a bit how to do that. But the real answer is just use ZFS.
I knew you were coming up with that. And it's actually in the article, so it's not a big surprise. And that's one way.
The script called bitrot is available in OpenBSD ports. And they also talk about using the parity archiver to use only a small amount of space to likely be able to repair damage to one of those files.
Yep. Very nice overview, and important topic for everyone using computers or storage media. Okay, time for our feedback and questions section. We are still running low on questions and submissions, so we try to scoop up what we have. But if you have any questions, then please send this to us. Don't be shy. Send this to feedback@bsdnow.tv. But we got this one from Raymond about MeetBSD California. Short and sweet, saying, hey guys, when and where are the videos for MeetBSD be published?
So a couple of them are out already. The videos from the Dev Summit are up. I've linked them in the show notes. They're on YouTube under IX Systems. They have a playlist for the Dev Summit and another playlist for the conference. For the conference, they have, I think, 3 of the videos out as of this morning, and the rest are still in the works. But you already have a couple of hours of content to hold you over until they post the next one.
Yeah, just to get the next dose. Yeah, excellent.
And by next week's episode, I will have a link to all of the videos from the Postgres conference as well.
Oh, excellent. It gets better and better. So you have something to watch over the weekend if it's raining and you can't go outside.
It might take you literally the entire weekend to watch all the videos.
Yeah. But yeah, if you have missed the conference and want to relive it somehow, then that's a good way of looking what was talked about. Okay, so thanks for that question, and thanks for the people who create those playlists and do all the video rendering and cutting. Next up is Greg with a question about stable versus release. Goes like this. Hi, Alan and Benedict. I've been a FreeBSD user for the last year and a Linux user before that since Slackware 3. One thing that has bothered me since switching to FreeBSD is the use of stable and release targets. Stable is actually the less stable version of FreeBSD, and release is actually stable. Is there a reason things are like this? It's very confusing to new users.
I don't know where a release would be considered less stable than stable, but so stable isn't meant to be unstable. But the important thing to understand is that when we call the branch the stable branch, we're not talking about the stability of it for operations. We're just talking about the stability of the ABI. So that means that a program compiled to work with that version, like FreeBSD 11, will work on FreeBSD 11.0, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, etc. So the guarantee you're getting is that the binary compatibility between applications compiled to FreeBSD 11 will work on any other FreeBSD 11. And that's why it's called stable. I agree it's slightly confusing. But in general, there's not much reason to use the stable branch, so you should just use the releases.
Yeah, which has a little bit more fluctuation in the APIs. But still, people use the stable releases for, downstream products.
So there's no release per se, but yes. In general, the stable branch is basically the pre-alpha of, like, stable 11 right now is the pre-alpha of FreeBSD 11.3. So it should just be 11.2 plus bug fixes and new features, and it should be completely stable. If it's not, that's a bug and should be fixed, but it's not. Yeah. I don't know. I've been thinking lately that we should change things around a little bit there and even go to just having FreeBSD 12, period.
That's it.
And we just have monthly or quarterly updates to that. So it's literally just FreeBSD 12 P4 or whatever. And it's not,
it's not
mostly because it gets confusing to people that FreeBSD 11 or FreeBSD 10.4 is newer than 11.1 and so on.
Yeah, that kind of overlaps.
And the fact that they end up intertwined, right? Where it's like 10.3 and then 11.1 and then 10.4 and then 11.2 really confuses people a bit. And maybe just calling it FreeBSD 11 would solve that. But then it raises the question, maybe we just go, it's FreeBSD 2019, period.
Yeah, a year release, and then we know what's
and then it just gets
newer.
updates once a month or once a quarter or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. People discuss
if
this.
any people have thoughts on how frequently they would like updates versus how long they would like to be able to go without updating kind of thing. Well, not how long you would like to, because I know most people would just like to never have to change anything, but...
Yeah. No, that's a good question, though.
There's a page in the handbook that tries to explain it, but I understand that it's not great. I, too, was caught by, the name stable, making it sound like, oh, I should be running that instead of this release. That was 4.8, I think.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah. Fool me once, right?
But yeah, nice that you're switching and trying out the BSDs or the FreeBSD in particular. And yeah, good luck on your journey. If you have more questions like this or get stuck somewhere, then don't hesitate to contact us again. And last but not least is MJ Rodriguez with an OpenBSD/FreeBSD support for single board computer question. Hello, Alan and Benedict. I am considering running a common Unix printing system server in my house for cheap and was thinking of buying some single board computer to do it. Are there any specific boards that work great with the BSDs, or should I stay safe and just use a Raspberry Pi? Thanks for the great shows. I hope to go to a conference one day. Yeah, definitely.
I think the Raspberry Pi 2 is probably the best supported one that would have everything you want. I'm not sure the support on the latest Raspberry Pi 3 and so on.
So I have the Raspberry Pi 3 and it's running my Zynga monitoring system quite well.
So does the Wi-Fi work though?
No, because that's the SDIO thing. I have a cable connected to
I don't know if
Ethernet.
It works or if there even is Wi-Fi on the 2. So yeah, the 3 works, but no Wi-Fi, just as a heads up. I think the Pine 64 is pretty far along as well. Not really my area of expertise. But yes,
I think they have external Wi-Fi dongle support.
The thing most popular, like a Raspberry Pi, is going to have the best support.
Yeah,
and yeah, I think the Raspberry Pi 3, because it's ARM64, will have precompiled packages and be much easier to do. So I would recommend that.
Yeah. So why don't you, once you have that done, this cup server, write it down and send it to us, or create a blog post out of it, because that might be interesting to another person out there on the internets, if not just one. Then we all have something new to learn about how to run a cup server on this embedded board of your choice, or however you solve that. That would be great. So that brings us to our end of this episode. Remember to send us anything that you find online or that's interesting regarding show ideas or topics you find interesting. Send all of this to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll have material for another episode next week.
See you next week.